For this unit, I will be unpacking some fourth grade social studies standards. Most states have adopted the Common Core standards. However, the Common Core does not have individualized standards for social studies from kindergarten to fifth grade. These standards are integrated into reading standards. While Arizona did adopt the Common Core standards, in 2015, the State Board of Education rejected them and because they felt the standards did not best represent the people and citizens of Arizona. Therefore, they established their own state standards. So I will be looking at Arizona History and Social Science Standards of 2018. For this lesson, I will be looking at 2 geography standards and a history standard. The first fourth grade geography standard is the ability to use and construct maps and graphs to represent changes in the Americas over time. The second geography standard is to compare the diverse ways people or groups of people have impacted, modified, or adapted the environment of the Americas. And the fourth grade history standard is about the cycles of conflict and cooperation and how it has shaped relations among people, places, and environments. The big idea for the first geography standard is that students will know how and be able to read and interpret information from maps, charts, graphs, so they can see maps, charts, and graphs and be able to see the data and make sense of it. Also, it is important that they can use information or use sources to create and construct their own maps, and that they can create maps to show changes in America throughout time. The second geography standard is to have students learn about diverse groups and how these diverse groups have brought changes to the American environment. How indigenous groups and kind of history there made changes to the environment, and how the arrival of Europeans also brought changes, and how interactions with them changed the landscape and environment. And the history standard, students will learn and that they'll understand how the arrival of European settlers to the Americas brought change, brought conflict, and other issues faced with that. So they'll be able to understand the interactions of different groups of people, indigenous groups, European group, be able to understand their perception, their biases, and understand why they interacted or made decisions that they do. Although these are social studies standards, throughout this lesson, I think there also is an integration of some math standards and reading literacy standards as well. So there's a correlation across multiple standards. To help me meet the standards, some activities I have planned are, a big plan is like a PBL that I have planned for this. Students will focus on the 13 colonies and relationships with the Native Americans. One of the first activities I plan to do before we kind of get deep into the PBL is I want students to be able to create their own map from what they view or their perception of what America looked like before the arrival of Europeans, to show what native groups they believed were where, or what land that they had control over, or places that they were settled. Kind of a pre-assessment. Then the class will look at maps of indigenous groups and kind of their range in the America, and then a map of the 13 colonies and the arrival of Europeans, and kind of be able to analyze these maps, look at them, see changes that were made. And then I would also plan on having students kind of use a think, pair, share strategy. I want them to be able to think about national boundaries and who defines a nation, what makes a nation, what makes a society, and kind of who determines that. And then they can also compare a map of the 13 colonies, kind of see a map, an original map of the indigenous groups and a map of the 13 colonies, and think about changes that this brought and impacts that it made. And that these activities will also be useful for later in the PBL when students have to create their own maps. So throughout the PBL, I want students to think about why people move and what changes it brings, for the good, for the bad. So for this project, each group will be required to kind of do a documentary or information about a colony. So that's a colony, a 13 colony, one of the 13 colonies of their choosing. For this, the PBL, I plan on using a rubric that will provide me some summative assessments. I will grade on a group plan, goal sheets, Like mentioned earlier, they'll have to make maps or graphs or charts about their colony, about the surrounding area, such as indigenous groups, about the terrain, the geography, maybe their trade, their economics, etc. They'll also have to construct research. The research can include history, demographics, the relationships that the settlers had with indigenous groups. There's good relationship, bad relationship, whatever. Economics, kind of geography, education, government, the struggles, weather, language, etc. So kind of to help the students gather information and kind of organize, we give students like kind of a research sheet or paper like this, and that the students can kind of determine who is responsible for researching what. And then this can also be used in the rubric to kind of grade that they research properly. I also plan on having the students write journal entries being settlers, journal entries being Native Americans. In these journals, I want them to kind of immerse themselves in that time in the culture and think about kind of, what life would have been like, struggles that would have had, perceptions, fears, hopes, etc. And through these journals, I hope that they can better kind of understand relationships and the struggle of the people. And also, the students will have the choice of kind of maybe doing a video, kind of a documentary video about the colony, or they can do a presentation. This will kind of be up to their choosing. And then they'll also have to do a final reflection. The final reflection is kind of to wrap up everything and to make sure that the students kind of can analyze and think about, the changes that people have made on the Americas, the arrival of Europeans, how this impacted indigenous groups, how different colonies had different relationships and other issues that they may have faced, and kind of see that they're different. And I also want them to kind of make connections between choices and perceptions and biases that people had, and kind of make connections to today and the history we have. Also, for some formative assessments, to make sure that students are learning, to be able to kind of measure their progress and see what they're learning, what they're researching. I plan on using exit tickets, maybe after the class, to kind of gauge where they are and with the progress of their PBL, what they're learning, maybe things that they're interested in, things that they're struggling, because I know through this history and conflict, students may struggle with ideas or perceptions or actions that people had. So, and I also plan on using polls or surveys kind of for the same way to kind of help me better help the groups see what they're learning, maybe give them boost or help them in certain ways. Finally, I hope that these activities and assessments help me meet the standards and help me kind of make connections and correlations, and that it all ties in well together. Thank you.